So my name is Jessica Meza. I am a adult survivor of childhood sexual abuse as well as domestic violence times two. Right when I turned 21, I met a gentleman, and just like very textbook, he was extremely nice, very supportive and whatnot. And a year into our 7-year relationship, he did start becoming abusive. First with the verbal abuse, instilling fear in me. He was much taller and bigger than I was. He would tell me stuff about his childhood or his upbringing that made him even a little bit more scary. Before I knew it, say maybe a year and a half into our relationship, I started to notice that it became abusive. And the interesting thing was, I didn't grow up with an abusive relationship. I grew up with loving parents, both my parents married till my dad passed away. So I wasn't used to seeing that in my childhood, so I didn't even realize I was in an abusive relationship until about 5 years into it. Now, my story is a little unique, I think, in the sense that after I left the relationship, or after I was allowed to leave the relationship, I found out that he was a warlock, and his mom that he lived with was a witch. And so a lot of the abuse, it was physically abusive, sexually abusive, emotionally, psychologically abusive. A lot of it was psychological, in the sense that in the way that he would manipulate me. It wasn't until about, I believe, 5 years into the situation where a lot of it was torture, and he was in the middle of him torturing me, and I all of a sudden I said, I'm gonna call the cops. And he says, what are you, a battered woman? And I thought about it. I said, well, he's never hit me in my face, so maybe it's not abuse, because I didn't know anything about domestic abuse at the time. And then he told me, well, if you call the cops, you're only gonna make me more mad, because I will get out. And at the time, I didn't know the Lord, and I didn't think anyone could help me, whether it was a priest or my parents or law enforcement. The only way I thought I would be able to get out of this was to leave the country and get an alias. And I just couldn't imagine leaving my family. And even that being said, the entire time I was in this abusive relationship, in some strange way, I guess as a survivor, another survivor could relate, is I was trying to protect him. And so I never told anyone about the abuse. I just hid it. And those who knew me always knew that I had a smile on my face. I was always smiling. I was always happy Jessica. But at night, when everyone would go to bed, I would just bury my face in the pillow and just cry and just weep. And I just felt so alone and so scared. I knew his mom knew. And I would look at her at times when we would be talking, and I would just stare at her and beg just God to reveal to her what was going on, because I didn't know how to get out of this thing. Unlike, again, a lot of survivors, I didn't stay because I loved him. I stayed because I was more afraid of leaving than I was to stay. My whole goal in life was to hurry up and live so I could die. And then fortunately, I should say, 7 years into it, he finally allowed me to leave. And I got in my car and I ran as fast as I could. But sadly, because of the low self-esteem that comes from being in a domestic violent relationship for so long, the first man that showed me any kind of attention or affection, I ran with open arms. And that man was now my ex-husband. But shortly after I met him, he did get locked up in a penitentiary. But I was so head over heels over this gorgeous man that seemed to be like a dream come true, that I ended up visiting him in prison, marrying him. I became a prison wife. I stood with him faithfully for 7 years. And that too was very abusive. It was psychologically abusive and verbally abusive. And right before he got out, I found out he was cheating on me, and he went to go live with somebody else. And I was just so devastated. When I first met him, I didn't know the Lord, but thank God that I came to know the Lord about a year after I met my ex-husband. Otherwise, I would have committed suicide, because that was the only thing I could have thought that would have taken my pain away. Sadly, since I didn't know the Lord, I had made my ex-husband an idol, breaking the first commandment, of course, and he was my only reason for breathing, for being alive. And so when you make a person your idol and they leave you or they disappoint you, you don't have anything to live for. And so when he came out, we did try to work on the marriage, and I was more than willing, because I stood faithful to him and I wanted to make this work. And he also hit me one time. And so when you've been in an abusive relationship once, you swear you will never allow another person to hit you. And when it happens again, it completely destroys any bit of self-confidence you had in yourself, and it just really just does something to you. But thankfully, I did get a lot of inner healing since then. I've had a lot of counseling and inner healing, and I now know the signs to look for. And I love myself way too much now to allow someone to even disrespect me, let alone lay a hand on me. But it's something so stealth the way it happened. And if you don't know the signs, if you don't know what you're looking for, if you don't have a strong relationship with the Lord, or a strong support system, it's so easy to get sucked into something like that, and to very easily find yourself in a situation like this. So that's a bit of my story, and very transparent about it, because I do want to let other people know how things like this can happen. As a woman of God, as a Christian woman, already serving the Lord, knowing that I was serving the Lord, knowing I was a daughter of the King, knowing His Word, knowing Scripture, I was still in this abusive relationship. And it wasn't until it was over did I speak up, did I say something, because I was holding on to that hope that maybe he'd change, that maybe if I can just get him to church, he would, the ex-husband would have some kind of transformation. And yes, that could happen, but I really needed to speak out. And again, now I know. So now I'm just so grateful for the education that I've had because of it. It's such a surreal type of pain where, for example, the very first time the first guy, that when he slapped me, it was almost like, did that really happen? Did he really slap me? It's a very surreal feeling, and you just feel so isolated and so scared. I remember every now and then I'll get a flashback, and I'll remember how scared I was and how badly I wanted to get out of that situation, but I just felt so alone. I just couldn't. There was just no one I could turn to at the time. You're just so scared till now. To this day, if someone, and this happened in my 20s, which is so interesting because I found out later that I was detached from my feelings. I never dealt with the feelings because I jumped from one relationship to another, which was, of course, in hindsight, a bad thing to do, but I just didn't know that I had to deal with it. And if you don't deal with your stuff, it definitely comes up. And so even now to this day, if someone comes up from behind me just, to jokingly scare me, or just even, hey, tap me on the shoulder, I freak out, I jump. And through therapy, I learned that that's part of PTSD. And so a lot of the situations, even as a child being violated, if someone were to say, oh, you're going to go sit on Santa's lap, or jokingly say something innocent, it triggers me because that was part of my abuse. And unfortunately, it has affected my relationships now, because if someone says something jokingly, maybe not thinking about it, of course, why would they? It triggers me, and then it puts me in a spot where it takes me back. So it's been quite a journey, and there's layers and layers of healing that I've had to go through.